Madam Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. This is the Committee on Appropriations. Before we begin this public hearing, I wanted to make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat of public health from COVID-19 and the variants, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We're using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at these public hearings of council committees are included in our public notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on philacouncil.com. And note that the hour has come. Will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate you are present when your name is called? Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image can be displayed on screen when you speak. Mr. Clerk?
Good morning, everyone. Madam Chair, Maria Quinones Sanchez.
I am present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Isaiah Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Brian O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember David O. Councilmember Alan Dom.
Morning, Madam Chair and colleagues present.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing has officially been called to order. This is the public hearing on the Committee of Appropriations regarding Bill 220114. Will the clerk read the title of the bill?
Bill number 220114, authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2022 from the general fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, and the grants revenue fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, to the general fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, the water fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, and the aviation fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from our witnesses we have for today, everyone who's been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that the public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be on the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Our first and only panelist to testify this morning on Bill 220114 is Marissa Waxman, our budget director. Good morning. You are connected and ready to proceed.
Great. Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson Quinones Sanchez and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Marissa Waxman, Budget Director, and I appear before you today to offer testimony on Bill 220114. The purpose of this bill is to obtain approval for the City Council to transfer funds from the Labor Reserve to various departments for costs associated with the new collective bargaining agreements, raises for exempt and non-represented staff, and vaccination bonuses. The administration anticipated these costs in the FY22 operating budget approved by City Council, set aside funds in a labor reserve to be allocated upon ratification of new labor agreements. Those funds were to cover new contracts for DC 33, DC 47, the FOP, the IAFF, Local 810, and school crossing guards. The reserve also included funding for 2.5% raises for non-represented and exempt employees that were effective as of January 31st, 2022. Now that most of the new agreements have been completed, this transfer ordinance will move funds to the departments. For the general fund, the total shift in appropriations included in the proposed transfer ordinance is $123,147,813. The ordinance includes excess appropriations beyond what is needed for the exempt raises, and those funds will be held in reserve. The ordinance also appropriates funds for the COVID vaccination bonus. Most of the costs are for direct payments to employees allocated by department, followed by $37.9 million for fringe benefits, which appears in the budget for finance. There are also Class 200 allocations for a few departments, such as fire and police, to reflect negotiated increases for uniform allowances. Bill 220114 also includes labor cost-related transfers within the Water and Aviation Fund. This ordinance does not contain any appropriations for purposes other than the costs of the new contracts, COVID vaccination bonus, and raises for exempt and non-represented staff. This concludes my testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any questions council might have at this time.
Thank you, Marissa, for the testimony. For the purposes of the record, I noted that in paragraph 3, you highlight that this ordinance includes excess appropriations beyond what is needed for exempt raises, and those funds will be held in reserve. Can you please explain for the record?
Certainly. So we had those 2.5% raises for exempts effective on January 31st, 2022, 5 months worth of raises. The version of this ordinance introduced includes funding for more than is needed for those 5 months of raises. And so as those were effective January 31st, anything above the amount needed for that will be held in reserve for the administration departments.
Back in November, when we had an appropriations hearing, we talked about this forthcoming appropriations to align our represented unions with our non-represented. What has been the history in the past when these collective bargaining agreements have been agreed, and when in the past has the administration provided unrepresented members the comparable raises, and why are we waiting 7 months later into the budget on this particular occasion?
Because I wasn't budget director at the time, I don't actually have all of the back knowledge about when, but I can certainly research that. I can tell you that the decision that was made this year was balancing one, as soon as those the new contracts were done, we wanted to make sure that those exempts and non-reps were getting raises going forward, but we also have to carefully balance that with understanding where the city's finances are, and we have a lot of needs in a lot of areas. And so this is what we felt we could do to basically balance wanting to do right by our employees who have been working incredibly hard and making sure that they also receive raises, but the amount and the timing we decided within the context of the city's overall finances.
How many unrepresented individuals are we talking about in exempt employees?
I believe there are about 2,000 exempt employees, and I will have to get back to you with the number for non-reps.
So in the past, because I have been chair of appropriations for a couple of years here, when these aligned, the latest we've provided folks with the comparable raises has been around, September, July. Obviously July 1st is the beginning of the year, but we've done these in September for the most part. Essentially you're saying to exempt employees are not entitled to what every other employee got effective July 1st. Is that the position of the administration?
So we've made these effective January 31st going forward. And while it's, obviously making sure that folks are treated the same is a priority, we have to balance this within the context of the city's finances. And at different times, this doesn't make the situation any better, but they're not always treated the same. Exempt employees, at least the administration's exempts, had to absorb some layoffs as well as reductions in salary through the pandemic. This has been an incredibly challenging time. We've had to make very hard decisions around pay, around staffing levels, and we continue to have to navigate that and make the best decisions we can.
The chair recognizes that Councilman O has joined the meeting. Lastly, what is the difference between what we're talking about between the if we were to give everyone, retroing back to September 1st, this pay, how much money are we talking about for these non-exempt?
It is, with a little bit of Excel, $4.3 million.
So we're debating $4.3 million, 2,000 employees, on whether they should be treated with equity and fairness as everybody else.
That is the $4.3 million is the difference between the effect raises that have already taken effect starting in January. And going back further, yes.
And so for the record, even though City Council is going to allocate this money, it is decision of the administration that they will put this in a reserve fund and not issue it to the employees.
You are correct, yes.
Any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none. Is there anyone else here scheduled to testify on this bill? Odessa, we had no one call up on the list. So there are no questions here further from the members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify. Hearing none, I want to thank the panel, Marissa Waxman, our budget chairman.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Councilman Dom has a question.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Councilmember Dom, Chair recognizes Councilmember Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief question from Marissa. Any of these funds probably were COVID related. Have we used all the monies we had for the COVID money from the federal government that we could have allocated to some of these costs, or have we used them all in other areas?
So depending upon which pot of money you are talking about. So FEMA dollars are typically on a reimbursement basis and generally, have to be approved costs. So we couldn't use that for that. The CARES Act money have been fully allocated. So the remaining pot of money is the American Rescue Plan proceeds. We are using those as revenue replacement. So basically they already are in part, they get just treated as a revenue stream. And so that is funding that over the course of until they expire in December 2024, we are drawing down. And particularly because raises are going to be going forward, the fact that we're drawing funds down over time, it's not like this is like 1 year and we revert to last year's salaries. So we have in our 5-year plan not drawn down all of our American Rescue Plan funds yet, but in order to keep the plan bbalanced, we do draw them down over the coming years, including in this year.
And was a lot of the overtime that incurred the last year or two had to be we could argue it was COVID related. So I just want to make sure that we've captured all those monies from the federal government, because then we could maybe, if we capture more, we could use some of that to the unrepresented that the chair is referring to.
Yeah, so at this point, the ARP dollar, the amount that we are getting is set. We have received the first tranche, the second tranche, there's a schedule to receive. We do not anticipate any more. So we are not able to, sort of assume more costs at this point because we're using it for revenue replacement. That's actually the most flexible way we could use it. So, we could technically nearly do virtually anything with it. And what we're really doing is replacing the revenue we lost. And so that in turn allows us to sustain our basic services. The challenge is the funding that we are getting from the American Rescue Plan, while huge, a tremendous amount of money, does not come close to fully making us whole from the revenue losses compared to COVID. So that money is already just filling holes in the dam. And unfortunately, we're not expecting any more of that sort of flexible money. We are gearing up to look at the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and some of the things, but those will have very prescribed uses. The ARP money, which basically is, we know and have already allocated, is the one that's really flexible.
Okay, thank you very much, Marissa. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom. As I was saying earlier, if there's no one else here, this will conclude the
Madam Chair, Councilman O'Neill, I have a question
Absolutely.
for Ms. Waxman. Ms. Waxman, yep. The chair's questions and your answers have dealt with September 1st versus January 31st, right? Is that
yes.
correct? What was the actual, if the non-rep employees if you had given the same retroactive to make everyone start their raises on the same day, would it have been September 1st, or did the 4 unions raises begin before that?
The 4 unions raises go back to July 1st.
Thank you. So the chair's questions are really not giving full would not be giving full retroactive, but a compromised retroactive.
Correct. So yeah. So
Okay,
it'd be
that's all.
12 months, 10 months, 5 months.
You answered. I'm just clarifying. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member O'Neill. I will again, if this this will conclude the public hearing. We will now go into our public meeting to consider the action to be taken on the bills before this committee. We are now in our public meeting, and we will convene the public meeting. I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll to take attendance for members who are participating in the appropriations public meeting. Will the clerk take roll?
Madam Chair Maria Quinones-Sanchez.
Present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Isaiah Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Brian O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember David O.
Present.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Present.
Thank you. A quorum having been established, the chair is going to call on Vice Chairman Kenyatta Johnson for an amendment to Bill number 220114.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the amendment for Bill number 220114 be adopted from this committee with a favorable recommendation.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment to Bill number 220114 has been adopted. The chair will now recognize Vice Chairman Johnson for a motion on the amended Bill 220114.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the amendment to Bill number 220114 be reported to this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposition? Seeing none, bill number as amended, bill number 220114 will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at our next council session. This concludes the business before the Committee on Appropriations today. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.